Hello knitting friends, this is Jacqueline from Jack Knits, and if you've been intimidated by cable stitches for your knitting, be intimidated no more, because we are going to look at the very basics of doing a cable stitch. Once you understand this foundation, you will be free to do any cable stitch without any difficulties. So let's get started on how to do these beautiful cable stitches. So let's examine exactly what is a cable stitch and what creates this little twist in the stitches for your cable. Basically what it is that every few rows in your pattern, you are going to knit the stitches out of order than what they are on your needle. And to do that, you are going to take a couple stitches from your next few stitches, set them aside with a cable needle, and then knit the next few stitches on your needle. Then come back to the stitches on your cable needle, and that helps you knit those stitches out of order, which produces this fun twist, producing this very classic cable stitch look. So once you've figured out how to do that little out of order stitching, which is not difficult to do at all, you can basically create several different patterns for cable stitches. You can follow almost any cable pattern that there is, because it just depends on the variety and the little differences in how you do that cable stitch. So let's get started on doing a cable stitch first, and then we'll talk about how to do some variations of those. So I have started here a little swatch with some knitting and a couple purl stitches, knitting, purl, and knitting. These center knit stitches are going to be where we're going to do our cable stitches. So I set up these foundational rows first, and now I'm on a row where I am ready to do a cable stitch. So let's show how that is done. I'm first going to knit these few knit stitches, these 6 knit stitches, and that's just the outside of my knitting here. Then I've got a couple purl stitches, and the reason that I made some purl stitches here is that it's nice to have a couple stitches that offset this cable stitch, that border this cable and allows those cable stitches to pop out. Whether that's a couple purl stitches within your stockinette stitch, or over here where I did a reverse stockinette stitch to offset this this cable stitch. So it just helps that cable to pop out a little bit. So that's what I did here. Did a few purl stitches, so we'll do next. And now I'm to the point where I want to knit my cable twist. I've got 6 stitches here that is going to consist of my cable, 3 stitches and then 3 stitches. I want to knit these 3 stitches first and then these 3 stitches. So to do that, let's grab a cable needle. Now this cable needle is shaped like this. There are other shape of cable needles. You can use whatever you feel most comfortable. These are a little skinnier, this is a little thicker. Use whatever you feel comfortable with. And I'm going to just take this needle and I'm going to slip the next 3 stitches onto my cable needle. 1, 2, and 3. And then I'm just going to hold this cable needle in the front. Just let it sit there for a little bit while I knit the very next stitches on my needle. So I'm knitting those out of order, knitting those 3 next. Okay, so now that I've knitted those 3, now I can come and knit the 3 that are on my cable needle. Now I can just knit them directly off my cable needle. I don't have to move them to my other needle, because this is basically a unique shaped knitting needle, right? I can just use this. So we're just going to now knit off of the cable needle. Our regular needle is just sitting here chilling in the back. We'll come to it later. So let's just knit these 3 from our cable needle. Set that aside. And now I can continue to knit the rest of the stitches on my needle, which in this pattern calls for 2 more knit stitches, or purl stitches, to offset that cable. And then we're going to finish with 6 knit stitches. Okay, so now you can see what it did here is it already started to twist my stitches. because I knitted them in the opposite order than what they were displayed on my needle. So now the next several rows is just going to kind of straighten that twist out again. Just right now you'll notice that because I knitted them out of order, these stitches are pretty tight on my needle. So it's going to take a couple rows for the needles to the stitches to loosen up and for that twist to untwist itself and kind of become straight again. So my back side of my knitting, of course, I am going to purl my purl bumps here and knit my knit stitches across just to continue in my pattern here. So the first 6 stitches are going to be purl. And I got a couple knit stitches, or actually those purl stitches on the other side, right? And then here are the next 6 stitches that I did that cable twist. So again, you're going to notice that these stitches are kind of tight on your needle, but that's okay. They'll loosen up in the next row or two. And everything will kind of straighten out and be smoother in the next row. A couple more knit stitches, and then we'll end with 6 purl stitches. Okay, so now you can kind of see how that cable twist is coming along. And I said the next several rows I'm just going to knit in my regular pattern without the cable needle or twisting the stitches until I get to about 12 or 6 rows later. Let's do 6, and that'll be enough to kind of straighten out my twist, and then we'll do another row with the cable needle and twist to do a second twist. Okay, so that in and of itself is really the basics of doing a cable stitch. So now let's talk a little bit about some varieties that you can do to make your cables look a little bit different. Now you'll notice when I did this, when we were doing this cable stitch, when we slipped these stitches onto the cable needle, I said, okay, now hold your cable needle to the front of your work and then knit the next stitches. Well, if you would hold this cable needle to the back of your knitting, it's going to produce a different look. I'll show you here. For this one, I held the cable needle to the front. That produced a twist from the right to the left. But on this particular swatch, I held the cable needle to the back, and that produced the opposite direction of the twist, going from left to right. So it really depends on where you hold your cable needle when you are knitting your stitches out of order. That determines the direction of the twist. So make sure you're paying attention in the pattern to whether or not they're saying hold your cable needle to the front or to the back, because that will determine the direction. And sometimes that's really important that they are going the consistently right way. Another way you can make cables look a little bit different from each other is how many stitches you are knitting out of order. For the swatch we just worked on in this swatch here, I put 3 stitches onto a cable needle, then knitted the next 3, and then knitted the 3 from the cable, and that produced this 6 stitch wide cable. Now for this particular one, I did it much wider. I put 6 stitches on my cable needle, then knitted the next 6 stitches, and then back to the 6 on the cable for a 12 stitch wide cable for a much wider look. So how wide you do it just depends on how many stitches you're putting on your cable needle. We already talked about how to offset the cable a little bit by putting a stitch, some border stitches of purl around it, but you can, do anything you like around your cables. You can put several cables together, maybe just separated by a purl stitch, and maybe twisting the other way, so the possibilities are endless. You can also see that this one is a much looser twist. That's because I put 12 rows in between my cable twist rows. So I did a twist down here, I did 12 rows, then did a twist, 12, and then a twist. That became this little elongated, looser twist, where here I only did 6 rows between each twist, and that produces a tighter twist. So how many cable rows you do depends on how tight the twist is. So I hope you have fun with this. Don't be intimidated anymore by cable stitches. They are really very fun to do. You can incorporate them in so many different patterns, and if you run across a pattern that has cable stitches in it, now you can do it with confidence. I hope you found this video helpful. If so, please give me a like, and don't forget to subscribe to receive notifications of new videos all about knitting tips and stitches like beautiful cables. Thanks for watching, everyone. Happy knitting!